My name is Christian Martinez. I'm the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry for the Archdiocese of Winnipeg.
Michelle Thiessen. I'm the Youth and Young Adult Coordinator for the Ukrainian Redemptorists of the Yorkton Province in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Mireille Grenier. I'm the Youth and Young Adult Ministry Coordinator for the Archdiocese of St. Boniface, and our presentation was I'm no priest, so what now?
To begin with the millennial generation, if you'd allow me, I'd just like to share a little bit about my story, and I think that would provide some context for what I'm about to share. As Sister Elaine mentioned, hi Sister, thank you for that nice introduction. I was born in the Philippines, and in 2003, that's when the family moved to Canada. That was 13 years ago. I'm currently 26. In September, I'm turning 27. And so half of my life was spent in the Philippines and half of my life spent here. So, just having that interesting perspective. At the heart of my adolescence was being part of a beautiful parish youth group at St. Edward, as Sister Elaine mentioned. And at first, my mother just dragged me to the youth group, of course, and but also having had the privilege of serving as one of the youth ministry leaders there for about 8 years before God, provided the opportunity to serve the Archdiocese of Winnipeg. I think key here is that the wider ministry is with youth, it's with young people, but actually in our roles, we have the privilege of serving more directly the coordinators of youth ministry, the youth ministers, the youth leaders, and so the young adults. And so, just getting to know them, how can we serve you better? How can you serve the ministry better? So we've gotten to know the young adults fairly well. And so these are the people we serve. So the youth and the young adults, in other words, our current millennial generation. And so just a quote here from Frank Mercadante, who is one of the pioneers of youth ministry in North America, we would say. So this quote here, if you're vaguely uneasy about youth ministry or any ministry with young people, you're onto something. Something has distinctly changed among 21st century teens. We can't always name it or articulate it profoundly, but we can feel it. So is that something that you sense? We certainly feel so, and that's something that has been validated for me, and I think for my friends as well, over and over again in our parish communities, to the point that it's kind of common knowledge now. We just had this agreement here in our here. So just very briefly, who are the millennials? So we have a list here. The millennials over there. So they were those who were born from 1982 to 2002. I think the defining characteristic is that they were the ones who reached adulthood in the year 2000. But in terms of the end number here, like 2002, people have other definitions for that. But the 1982 is fairly standard. So those are our millennial generators. They're currently...
Yeah, go ahead. May I interrupt? Are you going to give us an outline? No?
Yes, sure, actually, yeah.
Of that stuff?
Absolutely. We have contact information that we could share with you if
It's
you'd
just
like
that
to.
we won't have to write it.
Yep, definitely, sister. That's something that we could do. So the millennials, they're currently from 14 to 34 years old. So our youth, current youth and young adults. We're just really getting to know this millennial generation, and now we already have the I generation that's emerging right now, so that's really interesting. And something that's also interesting from Pew Research, since 2015, so last year, that very dominant baby boomer generation, this millennial generation has surpassed them in number. So that's something that's notable.
That's what passed through?
The millennial sister passed in number the baby boomer generation. Yeah. And so something as well is that the millennials are the largest and most diverse generation the world has ever seen, according to that research, in terms of their beliefs and preferences, in terms of their lifestyles, in terms of their worldviews, and so that's pretty interesting. So we have something here for you, just a quick and fun quiz. No one will be marked based on that. And so let's just try a couple of examples here. Youth trends between 1995 and 2009, just by a show of hands. Let's say engaged in a physical fight in the last 12 months. Who says the trend has gone up for this? Oh. How about no change? How about down? Really interesting. In terms of teen birth rates, for example, up. Who says it up? No change, down. Cool. In terms of, let's just, I'm just looking at some stuff here. Abortion rates, for example. Up, no change, down. Okay, very interesting. So what does this indicate for us? To share with you the results from this research, for all of the things listed here, the trend for this youth generation, all down. For all of these things. And so, like this is, this, we didn't do formal research kind of a thing here, but just something that, what might this indicate for us? We may not know the millennials as well as we think. And so there might be a perception about the millennial generation, like they're so disengaged, they're just focused on their social media, with the technology and all of those things. And certainly there's an indication that that's true. But if we could just be open to the possibility that we still could get to know this current generation of youth and young adults. So really, really interesting. I wasn't sure how that would turn out. So there's actually a reason why, just some of the big things about the millennial generation, like nicknames for them, the good news generation, the sunshine generation, and the next great generation, and perhaps we'll see a glimpse of why that would be. And so we just have a very brief video here for you, which we would like to show. We could share this link for you as well later on that video. So interesting, 62% of the millennials log into Facebook on a daily basis, so they're on Facebook all the time. They send about 2,000 text messages per month. It's a lot of text messages. And 43% of them say that texts are just as meaningful for them as phone calls. So, like we may have a preference for reaching out to them and communicating with them. But for this generation, this is just something that came out of there. 43%, almost half, believe that texts are just as meaningful as those phone calls. I think this is huge, massive. 79%, almost 8 out of 10, believe that their generation has more opportunity to make a difference than previous generations. So they do have that desire to serve. They do have that desire to affect change in our society, right? So that's key to understanding this, the millennials. They are on track to become the most educated generation ever, with 63% of employed millennials holding at least a bachelor's degree. So it's interesting. By 2025, 75% of global workforce will be millennials. Just something very interesting. Quickly, 69% believe that regular attendance in the office is unnecessary. So that's something that's just from the video, but that's the way that they work. For them, it's about meaning. Like, why would I go here? There has to be a purpose, right? So that's kind of the way that millennials think. And lastly here, millennials make decisions based on research. And I think that was in reference to their the way that they purchase things. But I think that could be applied to our ministries, to the way that we connect with them, to the way that we're inviting them to the various activities and initiatives that we have in the church. And so it's not enough that something is attractive on the outside. Really, we know this. We advertise events and we promote events all the time. It doesn't matter how nice the poster is. Millennials do research. So it's good to attract them, but when they dig deep, it's like, why is this worth my time? And so just really interesting about the millennials there. And so I just have a couple of slides left here, and I'll go through them fairly quickly. But now to talk about the millennials in the context of our faith. So once again, this is from Frank Dante's Engaging a New Generation, a wonderful right here. And so just some things here. In terms of millennials and faith, that phenomenon from previous generations where they basically just inherited their faith from their parents. Like if their faith practice is big, then there's a good likelihood that they do the same. Not the case with the millennial generation. If we see committed young adults in our churches, that's because they chose to be there. And so, an interesting situation for us as those who serve in the church. Yes, sister.
What does the 14 and 15 mean?
Yeah, the 14 and 15, sorry, great note. Those are just in reference to the page numbers in the book.
Thank you.
So, yeah. From formal promotion to personal connection. So, whereas before, especially with the Generation X, for example, this notion of if you build it, they will come. Not so with the millennials. They really much appreciate personal invitations. I could attest to this as someone who constantly invites people. Unless you send, the personal text or the personal email or the personal phone call or anything like that, that they might not respond to the invitation, right? From attractional to authentic. So rather than the idea that this is a very superficial and materialistic generation, actually, the attraction is not enough to engage this generation. They yearn for the authentic, right? From relationships to strategies of influence to relationships for relationships' sake, just basically, as we know, we've known this, it's about the relationships. It's all about the relationships. If the other things happen, if we end up serving together, if we end up doing these activities together, then that will happen afterward, but it's about the relationships first. And then lastly here would be just this movement from modernism to postmodernism. So just this notion of what is objectively true. That's not the way that the millennial generation relates to truth. For them, truth is what is experienced. So for example, the truth that we believe in, the church is the mystical body of Christ, which we believe in. For the millennials, they will take a look at that statement and say, beautiful, okay, fine. But why am I seeing people who are fighting in the parishes? Why are there strong personalities who won't forgive each other? For them, that statement, the church is the beautiful mystical body of Christ, holds no weight unless they see it in reality, right? And so just some of that. And then lastly for me, for these core characteristics of millennials, they are special and cover, as you know, like the notion of helicopter parenting. The parents are so engaged from the moment they're born. They value relationships, as we know. They are close to their parents. So this generation is no longer rebelling against authority or against their parents. And when we're talking about vocations, and we actually talk about vocations in our ministry sometimes, they always yearn for the opinion of their parents. So the suggestion here is if we have efforts of promoting vocations, efforts that target parents, for example, would not go to waste. So just something to share. And then the last thing here is that they are stressed out for a variety of reasons. It's a big statement. My friends will expound on that further. So just that statement. This generation feels that they're stressed out. And so just to transition here with this quote. Trying to go back to an earlier era and see the church as we know it, meaning losing a generation that doesn't relate any longer to our approaches and methodologies. And so a good question for us to hold as we go over the presentation, how open are we to revisiting our approaches and methodologies to ministry? And on that note, I'll pass it to you.
So as we have seen, our approaches need to change. And one of the major reasons why our approaches need to change is because of the society that these young adults have grown up in. And we've used the society of the words of culture of death. One of the first time it was used in a Catholic context was when Pope St. John Paul II wrote his Evangelium Vitae, published in 1995, that we are currently in a state of a culture of death. So this is where our young adults, this is the era in which they grew up. So a bit of a definition of what is a culture of death In moral theology, it's a concept that human life can be a means to an end without being an end to itself. So that everything is disposable. The life is disposable. Our cell phones are disposable. That paper cup that we use to drink our coffee this morning, that was disposable. So all of these things become disposable. And then if we look at the political and philosophical discourse, it's anything that goes against the culture of life. So culture of life, or anything that goes against like assisted suicide, which is one of our major themes right now in our current society, abortion, poverty. So anything that goes against what is the culture of life. So we will look at a bit of some theories that are related to the culture of death. So for example, materialism. So this one is like material possessions are more important than the spiritual values. So this is something that our young adults grew up in, that material possessions were more important than any spiritual value. They also grew up in consumerism, that our needs for possessions are more important than the basic needs of others, than the people that we are around. Secularism, which is the rejection of all forms of faith and worship. Our society is very secular at that level, that anything that it is faith-related is not to be discussed or brought upon. Also, they grew up in a world where like individuals are really important. So where the needs or the self-centered, the pursuit of an individual interest rather than the collective goal. Also pluralism, which is that more than one principle that can be correct, so that you can think something and I can think something, and it's okay, we're both okay. And which leads also to moral relativism, which means that we can both be right, we can both be wrong. If we don't agree, we will tolerate each other. So that also enters into the theory that these young adults are growing up in. And finally, religious indifference. That the belief that all religions are on the same equal validity, and also that they're not important even to a certain extent. So we'll keep these theories in mind as we see different vocations that these young adults are discerning. So how the world portrays religious life, and by religious life I also mean diocesan priests and all those. So it can be community or in regards of also in the diocesan priest. So religious life is really not always well portrayed in media. And I'm not saying not always well portrayed that they're not being seen as doing like holy things and blah blah, but more like sometimes it's not even well portrayed in regards of what is really living in a community. Yeah. Sometimes it's not that they're not showing good things, it's just that it's not what's really happening in people's lives. Also, sacred objects are often devalued. Like we know that habits and stuff like that have a certain level of respect. And when we see at Halloween that people can buy costumes of like the Pope, like really that's like for us it's not normal. And also I was like in the store the other day and I saw rosaries in an accessory store. I'm like, really? Rosaries? Like, and people buying it and like wearing it as jewelry. I mean, do you realize how this can be used for prayer and the beauty of it? But so yeah. And also religious life can sometimes be seen as a profession rather than a vocation. And what I mean this is when we look at, let's say, religious indifference, that theory, that religion is not important in our society. Well, if you talk to someone, you're like, oh, I'm thinking of discerning to the priesthood or something like that. Well, someone's going to be like, why? We don't need that. We don't need religious. So when we compare these as a profession, they're not seen as useful as lawyers or doctors or stuff like that. So this also enters into a tough spot for our young people trying to discern. And also, if you look at the theory of materialism and consumerism, both of these theories, we want possessions, and we need possessions rather than spiritual guidance or value, or rather even the value of others. So when society tells us, you need to get the BMW, if that's what you want, if you want to be happy, you need these things. Well, we know when people are often discerning into religious life or communities or anything of the sort, sometimes level of material things must be let go. And what society tells us, no, you need these things, you need everything, you need the latest, you need, and not to say these are bad things, it's just this is a pressure that society is putting on us. So yeah. And if we look at married life also, married life is often seen in the world as a contract. If I get married, it doesn't matter, I'm going to love that person the same amount I loved them after or before. There's no difference. Also, it's seen in between two individuals, no importance of sex. Cohabitation is normal in today's society, and it's like often people will compare marriages to buying a car and buying a house, which sure, it's an investment, but it's not the same kind of investment you're doing. They'll go for a test drive, they'll get, foundation assessment. Well, it doesn't mean if you have a good foundation of your house, doesn't mean like your house is not going to fall down, maybe. And it's the same thing. If like you need to have a good foundation in your marriage also. And in the end, also if it doesn't work out, people are not surprised. It's normal if it doesn't work out. So if you have a look at the different theories, you have the theory of individualism. So that was the pursuit of our self-interest rather than the collective. So if we've always been told, like, you're important, you're one person, be yourself, you don't need anyone else. Well, when you get into relationships, when two individuals get into a relationship and they're both being individuals, it's quite hard to get them together as one. And marriage is often seen as a vocation of service. Well, all vocations are seen as a vocation of service. And when we take marriage as not being a disservice to yourself, rather than to service to your Christian community, that gets into a dialogue, intense dialogue between these two. And finally, we also have how the world portrays single life. So single life is often seen as a phase, a part of your life before you find someone. That's what media tells us. Don't worry, you'll one day you'll get married. Well, anyways, it's quite contrary when you think about it. Marriages are meant to fail, but it's okay, one day you'll be married. And also, society also tells us that it's the perfect time to experiment, to see what you like in a person, to see what you want in the other person and stuff like that. Society, almost, it's like if you're not experimenting, you're not normal. Well, sometimes that can get into quite a challenge for young adults. So we go into the theories of pluralism and moral relativism, where more than one theory can be correct or will both tolerate each other. So when the society tells us, this is just a phase, it's going to change, you're not going to be single forever. And then we have the church that tells us, well, maybe this isn't just a phase. Maybe there's something more that you could serve, or there's something you're longing more. And then we have these two theories that collide. Well, which one is right? Which one is not right? How, if we're both supposed to tolerate both theories, how do we discern? So these are difficulties that our young adults are facing. So before I pass it on to Michelle, I found this quote from Cardinal Zenon Wojciechowski. It was in, I can't remember the book, but it was like Discerning Vocations for Young Adults, I think, in North America. Some of them must have a copy. Yeah, it was from the North American Conference. And I just found it was so nice. It says, the seed of vocations is abundantly sown, but the soil of the world is often corrupt, thorny, filled with distractions and evil passions that choke it and prevent it from coming to maturity and bearing fruit. So yeah. So now I'll pass it on to Michelle. Yeah.
So what can we do? What do we need that can help sow these seeds so that they're nurtured? And so that eventually they will bear fruit. So a couple of the different needs, there's many of them, but I'm going to only look at a couple today. And the first one is silence, and the second one is role models. So who likes silence? I've got 2 little kids. I love silence. Yes. So why do our young people today need silence?
They don't have much.
Connected to content.
Exactly. So I think this photo, which incidentally was taken about 10 years ago, that was right, so they got some flip phones there too, right on the cusp of people living with those in front of them. So the world is noisy. Everything is trying to get our attention. Our families, our coworkers, our boss, the media. It's a loud world. So silence is necessary. Yes, we're always connected. Never truly alone. It's a necessary evil, right? It does good things. I also waste a whole lot of time on this phone. So we have to be careful how we use them. And there's this idea of sorting. There's all this information that's constantly coming at us, messages and emails. And so basically what the millennials have to do is we have to sort it. Garbage, important. Oh, I'll get back to this one. Garbage. So constantly having to sort through all that information to see what is important. What do I need to pay attention to? Moving from one thing to the next. Standing still. When are we ever alone? When are we ever actually alone to hear our own voice, to hear God's voice, to know what's going on in our hearts? So even though that silence may be an uncomfortable thing for many people, I think it's also very necessary. I've spoken with some people, youth leaders, who say when they give the kids, maybe as soon as they get there, they get 10 minutes of silence. And yeah, it's very uncomfortable. But at the end of the year, some of them say that silence was really what they needed the most. In order to hear God, so we need the silence to hear God and to be able to examine ourselves and to understand ourselves. But also keep in mind, maybe we're the noisy ones in their lives too. How are they sorting us? I think I know where some of my emails land. So we're going to back up a bit, because if we need to start at the beginning with this generation, we might actually really have to start from the beginning. So without sounding too cliche, why was Jesus so popular? Jesus is generous, patient, kind, welcoming, courageous, truthful, and compassionate. Jesus is available to people. He is attentive to God and to others in the present moment, and he receives people. He has patient eyes that see people in their beauty as well as their pain. And he trusts people. He trusts our capacities to bear love. He trusts us with the good news. He trusts us with life. He trusts that we know more of God than we realize. He says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. He doesn't say, let me explain. He says, remember. So I think I could actually replace my daughter in Jesus' arms right now. And if he would walk in, that's the reaction she would have. And he would look at her. And he would say, hello, Cassidy. He would name her. And this is why Jesus was so attractive, because he gave his time to others. And, I know we can do all such great things and have such wonderful events and that, and we always love that busy term, but unless we sit down with people and look at them, that's how we make those true connections. And even though people might be connected like this, there's also a desire to be connected physically to people within these relationships. So Jesus, he looked at them and he saw them. He looked at people with love and he listened to them. I am probably most guilty of this with some of the youth ministry work that I do. I get caught up in details and I stop and I forget. I forget to stop and to sit and to listen to people. But it's so important. And just touching on this notion of this individualistic society, this concept of community, and I know there's a few people here who are trying to get young people to join into communities, but this whole notion of community is foreign to millennials. When they've gone through all their life being hovered over with the helicopter parents, being told they're special, their mentality is what can I get out of this? And I don't think we can really get upset at them for that, because I think that's just their normal right now. And so unless they are able to see and experience community, if they can have an authentic experience of what it is to be in community, well, that might just be something that changes their minds. So how do they get that experience? Well, I think, hold on. So I think this is going to segue us into the notion of a need for role models in our lives, too. So they need these role models to show them other ways to experience church. But, unfortunately, the last place many teenagers find people open and available is within the churches. Now, I'm not saying it's us, I'm not saying it's the other people. Sometimes, Christians say it. Well, if church Christians is all about loving, why are these people fighting? You never know what someone's first experience or lasting experience of church is going to be. We have no control over that. However, one of the last places many teenagers or young people find people open and available is within the churches. Instead of a listening ear, they find advice. Instead of a witness to their lives, they're offered programs and activities. Yet we know that the people who've had the greatest impact on our lives, the people who have changed and shaped us, are the people who were present to us, people who received us in the midst of our pain as well as our breakthroughs. So my hope is that the people who are running those activities and events, that they are also listening and being present to those people. So I'm going to show you a picture of my 19-year-old self here. By the way, I am actually a millennial. I just sneak in there. So this is a picture of me at 19 in the Welcome Home, our Ukrainian Catholic inner city mission that we have here in Winnipeg. And this is Andre. He was our youth leader at the time. He actually worked the job that I do right now. And first time I met him, he invited me to a Christmas party. And I thought, oh, sounds like fun. We'll go to the Christmas party. And so I went, and pretty soon we became friends. I think I helped him wash the dishes after his party was over. We became friends, and he had all these great things going on at St. Joseph's, where I think a lot of you were the other night too. So that was kind of our home base. And so he said, Michelle, why don't you come? I'm doing this tonight. I think it'd be good. Why don't you come? I'm like, well, I know him. Sure. Okay, I'll go. And so pretty soon, I was a regular in some of the young adult activities, and so pretty soon it's like, oh, Michelle, I need help with this. Do you think you're really good at doing this. Would you be interested in doing that? So Andre looked at me, and he saw my gifts. He saw the things that I didn't see in myself, and he named them. And pretty soon, this relationship developed, and he encouraged me in my faith. And he's now Father Andre, by the way. So here's us a few years later, at the 20th anniversary of the Welcome Home. He's now Father Andre Lalach. He serves in Saskatoon, and he has a young family just like myself. And we still connect whenever we're in each other's locales. So it's one of those things that's really hard to put into words, and it's a relationship that I wonder where would I have been if this didn't happen? If there weren't these. And you know what? And during that time in my life, there were other young adults who were kind of around, people who were living at the Welcome Home, who were living in community there, and I had a really good couple of years of being friends and having my faith formed in this environment. And then slowly, those people, I honestly remember it was the end of summer, and these people were leaving. Right? You come to the Welcome Home for a year. Oh, Andre was going off, and I felt, and it was like, what am I going to do? These people are leaving. But you know what? It was okay. It was okay because I already had that foundation. I already had experience of church, this different idea that church wasn't just Sundays. And so I was okay. And so eventually, I didn't plan on being here and doing what he did, but it happened. It happened for a reason. Who were your role models growing up? I want you to yell out names. Who was your role model?
My grade teacher.
Grade 3 teacher?
Grade 6 teacher.
Grade 6 teacher?
Older siblings. Grade 9 teacher.
Siblings? Lots of teachers?
Parents.
Parents? Excellent. Role models? Your role models?
My cousin.
Okay. Cousins?
Parents, teachers.
Teachers. Excellent. Okay. How did they inspire and encourage you? Who's the grade 6 teacher? Okay. How did that teacher inspire you?
She was a very welcoming person and very smiling and yeah, welcoming. And everyone seemed important.
Excellent. Good. Okay. And from someone over here, how did your role model inspire you?
We had a teacher just before her who was so strict and we thought almost unjust. So when she came, I don't know if she had heard, but she really encouraged us and put us up there, you know, and we were special for her in the sense that we were capable of doing special, you know, different things, and it really, really was great.
Okay. Any other comments? How were you encouraged by your role models? Yeah.
My parents entrusted us. They entrusted us. So we grew up knowing that we could do it.
Excellent. Well, those are awesome answers, and they all lead into these particular two things. Being authentic. She was welcoming. She was smiling. Teenagers and young adults today, they know when you don't mean it. They know. They might not tell you, but they know if you're looking at them, but your mind is really on where you have to be in an hour. Being authentic. Being transparent. Are you ready to put it all out there to encourage young people today? You know, when I go into my when I'm with the youth group at St. Joe's, and you know, am I willing to be there for them, to share with them, to help them in that journey, to share about myself? Well, if you're not, well, maybe you're not in the right spot. But that being said, I know it's hard. It's hard for some people who are in this. It's hard for some clergy, you know. It's hard to be with children. Some people just don't like being with kids. It's true though, you know. So I think people are definitely gifted in different areas for certain reasons, but being authentic and being transparent is definitely going to help with being that role model that young people need today. So we're nearing the end. We really, truly hope that you've learned a little bit about this millennial generation that kind of seems a little fleeting. You know, who they are and how they approach their faith in this day and age, and in particular their opinions about vocations and how that's shaped their life and the choices that they've made. But in the same breath, you all know they can't all be painted with the same brush. We're all millennials. We get along fabulously. It was awesome planning this workshop. We had a lot of fun. But we're also very different people in very different places in our lives, and that's okay. But they may require different approaches depending on what type of vocation work that you are doing. So we just need to keep that in mind. And the struggles are real. We had our aha moment where it's like, yeah, this is fun, but it's really tough sometimes. And so we all definitely need to be a part of a community to just encourage each other and to realize that, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a struggle, but you know what, it is going to be worth it. So I believe that these young models, these young people have these role models in their lives who can expose them to different elements of the faith that they in turn will be imposed to a positive culture of vocation. And so then they will learn how to go deeper in their spirituality and discover the many ways that they can also serve God in their lives. Thank you very much. All right.
You have thoughts?
Well, I read the United States Bishops came out with a book called "Connecting Our Young Adults to Our Catholic Parishes," and then there's a full chapter inside of it about vocations and discernment. And there were some great, actually, even activities that were offered inside. And one of the things that they suggested is offering discernment as a way of life. So it's not just discerning your vocation, but you'll be discerning also, like, should I buy a car? You know, should I build a house, buy a house? Should I rent? Should I live with my parents? Like, so discerning in regards of a way of life. And sometimes that is a good way to enter into discernments of how to live, and which way a vocation should be. So that was one of the activities that were suggested. And I think it's something that young adults are, like involved young adults are looking for, is these opportunities for really discernment, but not necessarily attached directly to vocations, but of discernment. So yeah. That would be my suggestion.
I have a purely personal opinion on that. I find, for me, in the work that I do, our young adult range is 18 to 35. And I find that population to be very elusive, and trying to pluck them out of there is very difficult. When I came back part-time to do this position, I encouraged our Ukrainian Redemptorists to get involved in family ministry, in youth ministry, and to get to know these young families, these young children. I told them there was a method to my madness. I said, in a few years, give me a few years, and you'll see them. And you know what? We've got a pretty cool youth group going. And in just a year or two, there's going to be a population of young adults there who have a different experience in church. That right now, that's my preferred way of going about that. But yes, discernment. I've also had young people say, you know what? How do we figure this all out? Not necessarily related to vocations, but that may come out of that. But there's definitely the stress of. A 16-year-old said to me, what am I going to do with my life? Almost 35, and sometimes I still feel like I'm asking that question, but he's 16, so.
Father, I have a couple of ideas of things that came to mind for me. The first is this idea of a vocations retreat. So we've done like all of that. I think the key for the millennial generation is, what are we doing to get them to the retreats? Because that's what has changed. Like, it's no longer you advertise and they will come, you know. Sister Elaine, we just hosted a vocations retreat last year in October. It was beautiful. We're actually going to meet again. So that's beautiful. We get a sense of community silence. So something like that, which is not really groundbreaking, but the effort of really building the relationship, taking the journey, the hard work of getting them there, I think is something that's changed. The other thing would be, I think Michelle mentioned it with family ministries. I think it was mentioned in the presentation. Initiatives with parents might not be a bad idea. I visited one of our youth groups not too long ago, and the idea was we just had a sharing. It was so interesting. I was with young people. What are some of your dreams in life? So that was the discussion question. And so the young people were sharing. Many of their ideas were based on something that they, along with their parents, worked on. It's what their parents think about matter to them a lot. And so